are seen as the positive and the neutral.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, like women are seen as the liability to humanity, like a necessary part, but also the the weaker sex, right? It's always framed. Gender is always framed as this dominant partner and subservient partner.
Well, like, I feel like a lot of it was like they had commercials to tell women what to do. Like, here's how you go to bed because you need to be a perfect woman
Yeah, right.
and stuff like that.
Have you guys seen? I don't know if you have like Amazon Prime, but on Prime Video, there's the marvelous Miss Maisel. I don't know if you've checked that out.
Mm-mm.
Okay, I know there's a ton of stuff to watch on Prime. So there's this show called The Marvelous Miss Maisel, and it takes place during, I want to say, oh gosh, now I'm gonna misremember. I want to say during like the 50s, uh, the heyday of like sexism after World War II, when like all women everywhere were, the men come back from the war, they take back their factory jobs and their white collar jobs. Women go back into the household, and they're coerced to become this like perfect model of a housewife, right? Like that's the cultural milieu of the 50s, is one of women need to go back into the house and be the silent partner to their men. And the show does a wonderful job of portraying this idea of like women like doing their makeup and everything and their hair just to go to bed on the off chance that their husband wants to have sex that night. Like it's like it's insane, you know. And the show kind of follows a stand-up comedian. Like she becomes a comic, and she gets a divorce, or at least a separation from her husband and all this. And it's actually a really cool show. Anyway, so there's these commercials, there's this culture and political culture and economic, like everything is tied in with kind of keeping women in their place, right? And that's the female identity, is being put in your place, right? Um, if you step out of bounds, you're not a good woman, right? You've somehow betrayed not only men but your fellow women who are towing the party line. And de Beauvoir is like, this is insane. Like, this is crazy. Women are people. Like, women are humans. And it, to our 2020 American sensibilities, of course, this makes a lot of sense. But, as late as like the 1960s and 70s, people were still trying to figure out what the role of women are in the West. A lot of women knew what they wanted, but men especially were like, oh, I guess, women are people too, and it's this slow realization that like, just like denying the vote to people of color and denying equality and opportunity, men have been doing this to women for a very long time, and denying them, keep on denying them a stake in Western civilization. So I don't know if anyone's seen this. It's a really short document, but what specifically is de Beauvoir urging women to do to fix this problem?
Find their own identity and not just be the other sex.
Yeah. Again, it kind of sounds simple. It sounds obvious now. But this idea of women having a separate identity from their men, when, like, look, even into the mid 20th century, women had a hard time finding reason to divorce in a court of law. Like, there was, there was no such thing as marital rape, according to the legal system, for a very long time, like deep into the 20th century. Women had trouble, obtaining property from their husbands, or even owning property separate from their men. either in their fathers or their husbands. Just like it's really recent where women actually got a separate legal and cultural identity from men.
Well, like, I feel like a lot of it was also because my grandmother was a single mom in the 60s, and she had to work 2 jobs. And a normal person could work 1 job in that era and do it, but women had to work more and harder.
Yeah, sure.
And they couldn't provide because they wouldn't pay them more money.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, that would have been an insane time to live as a single mom. It's like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you have a husband, right? So, and she makes this very explicit tie on page 993. She says, just like, and this is after the Harlem Renaissance. This is during the civil rights struggle that she's writing about in the 60s. Just like the Black community in America is literally fighting for its basic recognitions, women are too, right? Like, she's kind of shuttling in, like, kind of shoehorning in, not shoehorning, but making parallel causes with people of color and women. Like, we've all been suppressed by the patriarchy, just like Black people were literally enslaved, so were women. So this whole idea of the other, the suppressed, the subservient group. There's always a dominant force and a subservient one. Like that is, despite all of our rhetoric about equality and rights and freedom and all men are created equal, right? That's a very gendered phrase in our founding documents. Like, this has been a double standard forever, is what she's pointing out. And not just in the US, but in the West as well. All throughout the West. So yeah, I think that's the gist of it. There are deep analogies between the situation of women and that of Blacks, right? And of course, she talks about it in this kind of weird way, but still, like, the 40s, the 50s, the period that she's writing in, the 60s, de Beauvoir is a main cultural force for women and marginalized people in general. So going back to kind of the paper prompt, like, how does the West see itself? It sees itself as better than, and that could lead to lots of different things, right? The West is better than the communist East, but it's also got within it divisions. Men are better than women, whites are better than Blacks, and there's this struggle in trying to I'm forgetting the word. I'm grasping for a word that I want here, but trying to reconcile, I suppose, Western values of equality with the actual lived experience of women, of people of color, indigenous people, and so on. There's a contradiction there. And it kind of mirrors what Gorbachev says, about the Soviet Union. It's like, hey, look, we created a dystopia accidentally with good intentions. So too did the West, I guess, for a lot of people. It's not all it's cracked up to be.
So was Gorbachev trying to have a democratic economy, but then still have a socialist state?
Yeah, that would be a good way to put it, Katie. Trying to introduce free market principles into the Soviet Union, and trying to reintroduce freedom of speech as well, just on a basic, like, cultural level. Again, trying to restore the humanity and restore the incentives of people to work hard, other than just the state tells you to work hard, so work hard. Yeah, but they're still trying to be communists. Like, they're still trying to maintain this idea of, the Soviet Union is, the communism is the next step in social evolution. Like they do fervently believe that. Gorbachev still believes in communism. It's just, we need to curb some of its excesses and learn from the success of the West, because people are prosperous in the West. You know, people can go to the dealership and buy a car if they have the money. You can't do that in the Soviet Union. You have to wait for the government to give you a car. That sucks, and everyone knows it sucks. So yeah, so then communism has a crisis of identity, where it's like, well, if we introduce freedom of thought, freedom of speech, democratic principles, free market, what is there left to really be communist? Like, we've given up a lot of our communist core values, and that's partly why the Soviet Union collapses. Is it's this crisis of identity.
Have you ever seen Chernobyl on HBO?
No, I was reading about it 2 days ago, and I really want to watch it.
Phenomenal. Best miniseries I've ever seen. But anyways, there's like a quote at the end of it by Gorbachev where he says that Chernobyl was like ultimately like kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like there was no going back after that. Like the USSR was never going to recover. It's really unbelievable. Yeah, it's a complete failure of the bureaucratic state to prevent a catastrophe from happening. And as we found out in 2020, it's not just that's also why it's really kind of good to go back and revisit it.
Yeah, that show came out in like December of 2019, like just a couple of months before the pandemic really kicked off. And that's why I was reading about it. I was reading some article that was like, you know, when history books in the future are written about the year 2020 and the pandemic, start with the HBO show Chernobyl, where everyone watched it and was like, you know, those idiot Soviets, you know, they couldn't manage a crisis because they're too, you know, incompetent. And then fast forward to like March 2020, where we have democratic countries all over the world completely unable to stop this catastrophe. It's a failure of humanity, really. So, yeah. And plus, we have like 3 Mile Island and other nuclear disasters in the United States too. So it's not just the Soviets, but you know, it's much. They have it much worse. Chernobyl is much worse than 3 Mile Island. Okay. Well, any other questions or anything you guys want to talk about today?
What's the final due?
Yeah, good. I was just working on creating the final before we logged on. It is due the Wednesday of finals week, the 16th. Yeah, Wednesday by the end of Wednesday the 16th. So usually your stuff is due on Fridays, but finals week being a short week, it's just a weird, like the academic calendar cuts off in the middle of the week. I need to have grades in by like the end of the week or something. I can't remember. So yeah, Wednesday. By the end of today, you will have everything you need to work on the final. You can start working on the final, hopefully definitely by this evening, but hopefully like this afternoon.
So do we have more readings that we have to read for the final? In the textbook or in the documents?
Yeah, I think we've got, let me look at the calendar. We've got a Rex Tillerson, former Secretary of State for the Trump administration. We have Trump documents in this book. That's how new this book is. And I can't remember what the other documents. So yeah, so there are documents for next week. Oh, Tillerson and Angela Merkel's speech to the European Parliament. We may not be discussing those though next week. There's a good chance we won't meet on Friday. But you'll be asked, you know, in some way about it in the final. Like there's the short essay portion of these exams. So I would just at least glance at those documents and just get familiar with them. They'll probably ask, about, it'll ask about like the challenges facing the West in the 21st century or something like that. Yeah. All right, good. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you guys. This has been, if I don't see you again, and I guess there's a good chance I won't see you, at least, this semester. Thank you so much for a wonderful semester. It's been really nice seeing you guys every week. Thank you for being here, and it's been really fun talking to you and getting to know you to some extent, remotely. I know it's not the same as it is in the classroom, and that's sad, but still, like, you guys made it really good. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I know this wasn't easy, like, this semester teaching, but you made it really, easy for us and like very accessible, and you made it fun, and I just appreciate it. I'm sorry. I wish we would have gotten to have class together.
Yeah.
Like,
Me too. Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you.
I really appreciate the effort of having a Zoom class, because I know there are many professors who do not have Zoom classes either. But I like that you did the effort of doing that.
Good. I'm glad it helped a lot, guys. Thanks, Logan. Thanks, Katie. I'm
Yeah,
glad.
this class went really well. A lot of my other classes, they got all messed up because of COVID, but this one was probably the smoothest class this semester for me. So thank you.
Good. I'm glad. It didn't feel smooth for me at times, just with trying to run these things, but I'm glad it turned out well on your end. That's the goal here. It's for you guys. So good. Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate you so